The morning sky above Kepler Station burned with 3 different colored suns. Marcus Chen stepped off the transport shuttle, his worn Earth military boots touching alien soil for the first time. Around him, dozens of other beings emerged from similar vessels. Some walked on legs like his own, others floated, and a few moved in ways that made his eyes water trying to follow their motion. The Galactic Defense Academy stood before them like a mountain made of crystal and steel. Its towers stretched impossibly high, disappearing into the purple clouds above. Marcus had dreamed of this moment for 5 years, ever since Earth joined the Galactic Federation, and humans were finally allowed to apply for military service beyond their home world. "Form ranks by species designation," commanded a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The translator implant behind Marcus's ear converted the alien words into crisp English. He looked around, trying to figure out where the humans were supposed to stand. A massive creature with 4 arms and skin like polished stone approached him. Its voice rumbled like distant thunder. "You must be the Earthborn they warned us about. I am Commander Thax of the Zenthari military caste. You will stand with the other bipedal species until we determine your proper classification." Marcus nodded and moved toward a group of beings that walked upright. Most were taller than him, with different colored skin and various numbers of eyes. But they moved in familiar ways. One of them, a blue-skinned female with silver markings across her forehead, smiled at him. "First time off your birth world?" she asked, in heavily accented Federation standard. Her name tag read, Kayla Voss, Andrian Republic. "That obvious?" Marcus replied, adjusting his pack. "We all have that look when we first see the Academy." "I am Kayla. You must be the human representative. We heard your species was finally granted admission rights." Before Marcus could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to vibrate. A section of the crystal wall in front of them became transparent, revealing a chamber filled with swirling energy and floating geometric shapes. The voice returned, louder this time. "All cadets will undergo preliminary assessment. The probability detector will measure your species' potential for military service, leadership capability, and survival probability in combat situations. Results will determine your training level and eventual assignment within the Federation forces." Commander Thax gestured toward the chamber. "The detector is ancient technology, older than most of our civilizations. It reads the quantum signature of your genetic structure and your species' collective consciousness. It has never been wrong in 10,000 years of operation." The cadets were called forward one by one. Marcus watched as each being entered the chamber. The swirling energy would surround them, the geometric shapes would dance and pulse with different colors, and then a series of symbols would appear in the air above the chamber. Commander Thax would read the results and assign each cadet to their appropriate training division. A reptilian cadet from the Saurian Confederation entered the chamber. The energy turned green and gold, and the symbols indicated high combat potential with leadership qualities. She was assigned to the officer track. Kayla went next. The chamber filled with blue and white light, and her results showed exceptional tactical thinking and moderate physical capability. Advanced Tactical Division. One by one, each species was measured and categorized. The detector worked with mechanical precision, analyzing beings Marcus had never imagined could exist. There were energy beings whose tests created cascading rainbow patterns, aquatic species that required special flooding chambers, and crystalline entities that made the detector's geometric shapes resonate like musical instruments. "Fascinating technology," Marcus muttered to himself as he watched a telepathic species undergo testing. Their examination created patterns of pure thought that manifested as shifting mathematical equations in the air. "Your turn, Earthborn," Commander Thax announced. Marcus walked toward the chamber, his heart beating faster with each step. Through the transparent wall, he could see the energy patterns still swirling from the previous cadet's test. The other cadets had gathered to watch. Word had spread that this was the first human to be tested, and apparently that was significant enough to draw attention. "Remember," Commander Thax called out, "the detector reads not just your individual potential, but the quantum echo of your entire species. It sees the sum total of human genetic memory, instinct, and capability. Whatever it reveals will determine how Earthborn humans are classified in Federation service." The chamber door slid open with a sound like singing crystal. Marcus stepped inside and immediately felt the weight of the energy surrounding him. It was warm and cold at the same time, and it seemed to be examining him from the inside out. The geometric shapes began to orbit around him, spinning faster and faster until they became blurs of light. Then something changed. The energy patterns, which had been flowing smoothly for every other cadet, began to fluctuate wildly. The geometric shapes stopped their orderly dance and started moving in chaotic spirals. The chamber's humming grew louder, then quieter, then louder again, as if the detector was struggling with something it couldn't understand. Outside the chamber, Commander Thax's 4 eyes widened. The other instructors, representing a dozen different species, gathered around the control panels with expressions of confusion and concern. Kayla pressed herself against the transparent wall, trying to see what was happening inside. The energy around Marcus began cycling through colors he didn't know existed. The shapes were now moving so fast they appeared to be in multiple places at once. And then, without warning, everything stopped. The chamber fell silent. The energy patterns froze in mid-swirl. The geometric shapes hung motionless in the air like suspended thoughts. Even the background hum of the Academy's system seemed to pause. Commander Thax checked his readings twice, then a third time. "This is impossible," he muttered in his native tongue before catching himself and switching to Federation Standard. "The detector is not responding." "What does that mean?" asked Kayla. "It means," said a new voice, "that the detector cannot categorize what it has found." Everyone turned to see who had spoken. A being unlike any Marcus had seen emerged from the shadows at the back of the observation area. It was tall and thin, wrapped in flowing robes that seemed to be made of the space between stars. Its face was hidden beneath a hood, but 2 points of light glowed where eyes should be. "I am Observer Venth of the Cosmic Council," the being continued. "I have been monitoring this examination from the beginning." Commander Thax immediately stood at attention. The Cosmic Council was legendary, even among the Academy instructors. They were said to be the oldest beings in the galaxy, the ones who had originally created the Federation and established the laws that governed interstellar civilization. "Observer Venth," Thax said formally. "The detector appears to be malfunctioning. The human cadet's readings are unprecedented." "The detector is functioning perfectly," Observer Venth replied. "It is simply encountering something it has never seen before." Inside the chamber, Marcus stood perfectly still, afraid to move. The energy around him remained frozen, and he could feel the weight of thousands of years of technology trying to analyze something it couldn't comprehend. "What exactly is it detecting?" Kayla asked. Observer Venth moved closer to the chamber, the light points of his eyes focusing on Marcus. "The detector measures genetic potential, species memory, and evolutionary capability. For every species it has tested, these factors follow predictable patterns. Each civilization develops along certain paths, with certain limitations imposed by their biology, their environment, and their collective psychology." The observer paused, and when he continued, his voice carried a note that might have been awe. "Humans appear to have no such limitations." "That's impossible," Commander Thax protested. "Every species has evolutionary boundaries, physical limitations, psychological barriers. It's a fundamental law of biology and consciousness development." "Indeed. Yet the detector is reading genetic memory that spans not just Earth's history, but memories that somehow include scenarios and challenges that humans have never actually faced. It detects survival instincts for environments that don't exist on Earth, combat reflexes for weapons your species has never seen, leadership patterns for commanding species you've never met." Marcus could hear the conversation through the chamber's communication system, but he was more focused on what he was experiencing inside. The frozen energy around him wasn't just analyzing him. He realized it was learning from him. And somehow, he was learning from it. In the swirling patterns, he began to see images, battlefields on worlds he'd never visited, technologies that Earth hadn't invented yet, strategies for fighting enemies that existed only in theoretical military scenarios, but they didn't feel like foreign concepts. They felt like memories he'd always carried but never accessed. The human appears to be adapting to the examination process, Observer Venth noted. This is also unprecedented. The detector is designed to be a one-way analysis. The subject should not be able to interface with its systems. Can we extract him safely? Thax asked. Unknown. The detector has never encountered a situation where the subject begins to integrate with its analytical matrix. Terminating the process now could damage both the human and the detector itself. Outside the chamber, the other cadets watched in fascination and growing concern. What had started as a routine examination was becoming something else entirely. Some of the instructors were making urgent communications to their superiors. Others were taking detailed readings of the unprecedented energy signatures coming from the chamber. Kayla noticed that the Academy's main systems were beginning to respond to whatever was happening in the examination chamber. Lights throughout the facility were fluctuating in rhythm with the frozen energy patterns around Marcus. Computer terminals were displaying readouts in languages that their translation software couldn't identify. Is the entire Academy being affected? She asked. Observer Venth nodded slowly. The detector is connected to the Academy's primary systems for data analysis and storage. It appears that the human's examination is creating feedback loops throughout the network. The Academy's computers are trying to process information that doesn't fit their programming parameters. Inside the chamber, Marcus was experiencing something extraordinary. The energy around him had become responsive to his thoughts. When he focused on a particular geometric shape, it would move closer and begin displaying images. He saw battles between starships, diplomatic negotiations between species he didn't recognize, and scientific discoveries that pushed the boundaries of what he thought was possible. But more than that, he was beginning to understand the purpose behind the detector itself. It wasn't just measuring potential. It was designed to find beings capable of protecting something important enough that an ancient civilization had built this technology to test every species in the galaxy for thousands of years. Observer Venth, Marcus called out, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's communication system. This machine isn't just testing us, is it? It's looking for something specific. The observer's hood turned toward him. Elaborate. The energy patterns, the genetic analysis, the species memory examination. They're not random tests. They're designed to identify beings capable of handling a particular type of responsibility, something that requires not just military skill, but the ability to adapt to completely unknown situations. There was a long pause before Observer Venth responded. The human has accessed deeper levels of the detector's programming than should be possible. He is correct. The detector was created to identify beings capable of serving as guardians. Guardians of what? Commander Thax demanded. Knowledge that could destroy the galaxy if it fell into the wrong hands. Technologies that could unravel the fabric of space itself. And most importantly, the ability to make decisions that could affect the survival of every living being in the known universe. The implications of this revelation hit everyone at the same time. The Academy wasn't just training military officers. It was identifying and preparing beings for a responsibility that spanned the entire galaxy. And, according to the detector, humans possessed capabilities that made them uniquely suited for this role. How many guardians currently exist? Kayla asked. 3, Observer Venth replied. The minimum number required to maintain the safeguards that protect galactic civilization. When a guardian dies or becomes incapacitated, the detector helps identify replacements. In 10,000 years, it has identified exactly 47 beings capable of serving in this capacity. Marcus could feel the weight of this information settling into his consciousness. The energy around him was still frozen, but he sensed that it was waiting for something. A decision, perhaps, or an acceptance of what the examination had revealed. What happens if I agree to this responsibility? He asked. You would undergo training that goes far beyond anything offered at this academy. Observer Venth explained. You would gain access to knowledge accumulated over millions of years of galactic history. You would be given tools and abilities that would make you capable of protecting civilization itself. But you would also carry the burden of knowing threats that others cannot imagine, and making decisions that could affect billions of lives. Marcus thought about Earth. About the people he'd left behind when he joined the Federation. He thought about humanity's place in the galaxy, and what it might mean for his species if he took on this role. And if I refuse, then the Detector will classify you as it has classified thousands of other beings. You will receive excellent military training and serve the Federation with honor. But the position of Guardian will remain unfilled until another candidate can be found. The chamber remained frozen, waiting for his decision. Outside, the Academy's systems continued to fluctuate as they tried to process the unprecedented situation. The other cadets and instructors watched in silence, understanding that they were witnessing something that might determine the future of galactic civilization. Marcus looked at the swirling energy patterns around him, at the geometric shapes that seemed to contain the accumulated wisdom of ancient civilizations. He thought about the images he'd seen, the memories that weren't his own but felt familiar nonetheless. He considered the responsibility being offered to him, and what it would mean for both himself and humanity. In the distance, alarms began to sound. Not emergency alarms, but notification signals indicating that the situation had attracted attention from the highest levels of Federation command. Observer Venth tilted his hooded head as if receiving communication from unseen sources. The Cosmic Council has been notified of this development, he announced. Representatives are en route to witness the conclusion of this examination. What happens here today will be remembered for millennia. Marcus took a deep breath and made his choice. I accept, Marcus said quietly, his words carrying through the frozen chamber like ripples through still water. The moment he spoke, the energy around him exploded into motion. The geometric shapes began spinning so fast they became pure streams of light. Colors Marcus had never seen before painted the chamber walls, and the humming grew so intense that the Academy's crystal foundations began to resonate in harmony. Observer Venth stepped back as readings from the chamber spiked beyond anything the monitoring equipment could display. The Detector is activating protocols that have been dormant for 3,000 years, he announced to the gathering crowd of instructors and cadets. Commander Thax watched his instruments with 4 eyes wide in disbelief. The energy output is exceeding all safety parameters. Should we evacuate the Academy? No, Observer Venth replied firmly. The Detector knows what it is doing. It has waited millennia for a candidate with this potential. We must trust the process. Inside the chamber, Marcus felt changes beginning in his body and mind. The energy wasn't just scanning him anymore. It was altering him. Information flowed into his consciousness at impossible speeds. Languages he'd never heard became as familiar as English. Scientific principles that Earth's greatest minds had only theorized about settled into his understanding like remembered lessons. But with the knowledge came something else. Memories that belonged to the previous Guardians. He saw through the eyes of beings from across the galaxy, who had stood where he now stood, who had made the same choice he had just made. Their experiences became his experiences. Their understanding became his understanding. The most recent Guardian had been a crystalline entity from the Andromeda sector. Through her memories, Marcus learned about the Devourers, ancient machines created by a civilization that had transcended physical existence billions of years ago, designed to consume entire galaxies and convert their matter into processing power for incomprehensible calculations. The machines had been dormant for eons, but something was beginning to wake them. Before her, a gaseous being from the galactic core had guarded against the entropy cult, fanatics who believed that universal heat death was not a natural end but a goal to be accelerated. They had developed weapons that could unravel the fundamental forces holding matter together. Further back, a Guardian had faced the Mind Plague, a form of sentient information that could rewrite the consciousness of any being it contacted, turning them into extensions of itself. It had taken the combined effort of 3 Guardians and the sacrifice of an entire star system to contain that threat. Marcus realized with growing horror that these weren't historical threats. They were ongoing responsibilities. The Guardians didn't just respond to crises. They actively maintained the barriers and safeguards that kept these nightmares from awakening. The knowledge integration is proceeding faster than expected, Observer Venth noted. Studying his readings, human neural patterns appear to be exceptionally adaptable to Guardian protocols. Outside the chamber, more beings were arriving. Representatives from every major Federation species had been summoned to witness this unprecedented event. Kayla found herself standing next to beings she'd only seen in Academy textbooks. The ethereal collective sent representatives that looked like moving aurora. The machine collective dispatched synthetic beings, whose metal bodies reflected the chamber's light in complex patterns. "Has this ever happened before?" Kayla asked a nearby instructor, a six-armed being from the Hexapod Federation. "Never," the instructor replied. "The Guardian selection process usually takes place in secret, far from Academy worlds. The fact that it's happening here, during routine cadet evaluation, suggests something extraordinary about this human." The truth was more complex than any of them realized. Inside the chamber, Marcus was learning that Guardian candidates weren't selected randomly. The Detector had been monitoring humanity since their first radio transmissions reached space. It had analyzed their literature, their media, their history, looking for signs of the adaptability and moral flexibility required for Guardian service. What it found was unique in galactic history. Every other species developed along predictable evolutionary paths. They faced challenges appropriate to their environment and capabilities. Their mythology and fiction reflected scenarios they might realistically encounter. Human imagination was different. Human stories included impossible situations, unprecedented challenges, and moral dilemmas that had no clean solutions. Human minds routinely considered scenarios that violated the fundamental assumptions of their own reality. They created fiction about time travel, parallel dimensions, reality manipulation, and threats that no species in their universe had ever faced. This wasn't accidental, Marcus learned. Humanity's capacity for impossible imagination was itself an evolutionary adaptation. Earth was located in a region of space where the barriers between dimensions were naturally thin. For millions of years, human minds had been unconsciously exposed to echoes from alternate realities, glimpses of possibilities that existed beyond their own universe. "The integration is reaching completion," Observer Venth announced. "The human is accessing the final Guardian protocols." The chamber's energy suddenly focused into a single point of brilliant light, hovering above Marcus's head. When the light touched him, knowledge exploded through his consciousness. He learned about the hidden war, the constant battle being fought in dimensions adjacent to normal space. Entities that existed between realities were constantly probing the barriers that kept them from invading the material universe. The Guardians maintained technology that reinforced those barriers and dealt with anything that managed to break through. But the situation was becoming critical. The barriers were weakening, not through any external attack, but because the very expansion of the universe was stretching them thin. In approximately 2,000 years, the barriers would fail entirely, and the material universe would be flooded with entities and energies that could rewrite the laws of physics themselves. Previous Guardians had been searching for a solution for millennia. They'd investigated technologies from a dozen extinct civilizations, consulted with beings that existed in higher dimensions, and even attempted to communicate with the universe itself through quantum consciousness interfaces. None of it had worked. The problem required a different kind of thinking. It required beings capable of imagining solutions that violated everything they knew about reality. It required minds that could accept impossible situations and find ways to make them possible. It required human imagination applied to Guardian knowledge. Marcus understood now why the Detector had reacted so strongly to his examination. Humanity wasn't just another species to be catalogued and trained. They were the solution the galaxy had been waiting for without knowing it. The energy around him began to settle into stable patterns. The geometric shapes arranged themselves into complex configurations that looked almost like blueprint designs. The chamber's humming decreased to a pleasant harmonic that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. "The transformation is complete," Observer Venth announced. "The human has successfully integrated Guardian protocols." A lever. The chamber's walls became transparent, allowing everyone outside to see Marcus clearly. He looked the same physically, but there was something different about his presence. He moved with purpose that hadn't been there before, and his eyes held depths that spoke of knowledge far beyond his years. "How do you feel?" Kayla asked as the chamber door opened. Marcus considered the question carefully. He felt like himself, but also like he was connected to something vast and ancient. The academy around him looked smaller somehow, as if he was seeing it from a much greater perspective. "Different," he said finally. "I understand things now that I didn't before. About the galaxy, about the threats we face, about why the Federation exists. Commander Thax approached cautiously. "What are your orders, Guardian?" "First, we need to accelerate humanity's integration into the Federation," Marcus replied. "My people need to understand their role in what's coming. Second, we need to begin identifying other potential human guardians. The challenges ahead will require more than 3 guardians can handle." Observer Venth nodded approvingly. The Cosmic Council anticipated this possibility. "We have already begun preparing protocols for expanding the Guardian Corps. There's something else," Marcus continued. "The barriers between realities aren't just weakening randomly. Something is actively working to weaken them from the other side. The entities trapped in the adjacent dimensions have organized themselves into a coherent force. They're planning a coordinated assault on our reality." This revelation sent murmurs of concern through the gathered representatives. The idea that their universe might be under organized attack from entities existing in parallel dimensions was beyond anything they'd prepared for. "What do they want?" asked the representative from the ethereal collective. "To exist in our reality," Marcus explained. "Where they come from? Consciousness and matter exist in different states. They want to experience physical existence, but their nature is incompatible with our universe. If they succeed in breaking through, they won't just destroy our reality, they'll remake it into something that can sustain them." "How long do we have?" Commander Thax asked. "According to the Guardian archives, the coordinated assault will begin in approximately 50 years, but the preparation phase has already started. Small breaches are occurring across the galaxy, allowing scout entities to examine our defenses and test our responses." Marcus walked to the Academy's main display screen and activated Guardian protocols he somehow knew how to use. The screen showed a map of the galaxy with thousands of small red dots scattered across it. "Each of these dots represents a dimensional breach that has occurred in the past year," he explained. "The pattern isn't random. They're mapping our civilization, learning about our technologies and capabilities, identifying our weaknesses." The scale of the threat was overwhelming. The gathered representatives began urgent communications with their homeworlds, sharing the information about humanity's unique role and the coming danger. "What about the other Guardians?" Kayla asked. "Where are they, and what are they doing?" Marcus accessed memories that belonged to his predecessor. "Guardian Chrythia is monitoring the galactic core, where the dimensional barriers are naturally strongest. She's working to understand why the barriers are weakening faster than predicted. Guardian Vorthak is in the Outer Rim, investigating reports of entire star systems that have disappeared without trace." "Disappeared how?" "Not destroyed. Displaced. Moved to adjacent dimensions where the scout entities can study them without interference. We estimate that over 300 star systems have been relocated in the past millennium." Observer Venth stepped forward. "This information changes everything. The Cosmic Council must convene immediately to discuss galactic defense strategies." "There's one more thing," Marcus said. "The reason the Detector reacted so strongly to my examination, the reason humans are uniquely suited for Guardian service. Our brains don't just imagine impossible scenarios. Under the right conditions, we can make impossible scenarios real." "Explain," Observer Venth demanded. "Human consciousness operates partially in the same dimensional spaces that these entities inhabit. That's why our imagination seems unlimited compared to other species. We're naturally connected to the source of their power. With proper training and technology, humans can manipulate the fundamental forces they use to breach dimensional barriers." Marcus activated another display, showing technical specifications that made the Academy's most advanced instructors stare in amazement. The previous Guardians could only maintain existing defenses and respond to threats. Humans can create new defenses, design countermeasures, and potentially even go on the offensive. "You mean we could fight back?" asked the Machine Collective representative. "We mean humans could seal the barriers permanently," Marcus corrected. "Not just maintain them, but reinforce them to the point where dimensional travel becomes impossible for these entities." The implications were staggering. For the first time in galactic history, there was a realistic possibility of ending the hidden war permanently. But Marcus's next words tempered their optimism. The process would require volunteers willing to undergo permanent transformation. Humans who accept Guardian enhancement don't just gain knowledge and abilities, they become partially dimensional beings themselves. They can exist in our reality, but they're no longer entirely human. What do you mean? Kayla asked quietly. Marcus looked at his hands, seeing them in spectrums of light that extended beyond visible wavelengths. I can see the dimensional barriers now. I can feel the pressure from the entities trying to break through. I understand the mathematics that govern reality itself, but I also know that I can never return to Earth as I was. This transformation is permanent and irreversible. The sacrifice the Guardians make, Observer Venth said solemnly, has always been understood by the Cosmic Council. What you're proposing would require humans to give up their humanity to save not just their own species, but all life in the galaxy. Marcus nodded. The question is whether humanity will be willing to make that choice when they understand what's at stake. The gathered representatives began discussing the logistical challenges of explaining the situation to the Federation's member worlds. How do you tell billions of beings that their reality is under assault by entities they can't see or comprehend? How do you ask an entire species to volunteer for transformation into something beyond their original nature? There's still time to prepare, Marcus said, but we need to begin immediately. The scout entities are learning about us faster than anticipated. Some of them have already begun attempting to possess Federation citizens and infiltrate our societies. Commander Thax's forearms gestured urgently. Are you saying there could be possessed beings among us right now? Almost certainly. The possession process is subtle. The entities don't completely replace consciousness. They influence it, gradually altering the host's motivations and decision-making processes. They're patient. They can spend years slowly corrupting a single individual. This revelation prompted immediate security protocols. Representatives began scanning their own delegations for signs of dimensional interference. The Academy's systems were upgraded with Guardian technology that could detect the unique energy signatures of possessed beings. Marcus watched the controlled chaos around him with mixed emotions. He had the knowledge to help save the galaxy, but he also understood the enormous cost that victory would require. The transformation he'd undergone was just the beginning. To permanently seal the dimensional barriers would require dozens, perhaps hundreds of humans to accept similar transformations. And there was something else, something he hadn't yet shared with the others. The memories he'd inherited from previous Guardians included a warning. The entities threatening their reality weren't the ultimate threat. They were refugees, fleeing from something even more dangerous that existed in the deepest dimensional layers. If the barriers were sealed too completely, if the entities were trapped in their current dimensions with no hope of escape, they might become desperate enough to wake the thing they were running from. Marcus decided to keep that knowledge to himself for now. The immediate threat was manageable. The ultimate threat was still theoretical, but as he watched the Federation's representatives planning their galaxy's defense, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to trade one nightmare for another. 3 months after Marcus's transformation, Earth received the most important message in human history. The Federation had revealed everything: the hidden war, the dimensional entities, the weakening barriers, and humanity's unique role in the galaxy's defense. The response from Earth surprised even Marcus. Over 2 million humans volunteered for Guardian transformation within the first week. Your species continues to defy all predictions, Observer Venth told Marcus as they stood in the newly constructed Guardian training complex orbiting Earth's moon. Through the observation deck's transparent walls, they could see dozens of ships arriving from Earth, each carrying volunteers who understood they might never return home as they were. Fear brings out the best in humans sometimes, Marcus replied, watching a transport dock with gentle precision. When we understand that everything we care about is threatened, we'll sacrifice anything to protect it. The training complex was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Built using Guardian technology and human engineering principles, it existed partially in normal space and partially in adjacent dimensions. Trainees would learn to perceive and navigate the dimensional barriers while maintaining their connection to baseline reality. Dr. Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister, emerged from the latest transport. She was among the volunteers, despite being one of Earth's leading theoretical physicists. When she saw Marcus waiting in the arrival bay, Her expression mixed joy with profound sadness. "You look like my brother," she said quietly. "But you feel different, like you're standing in several places at once." Marcus embraced her carefully. His enhanced perception could see the dimensional resonance patterns surrounding every being, and he had to be cautious not to accidentally expose unprotected minds to forces they couldn't handle. "The transformation changes us," he admitted. "But it doesn't erase who we were. I'm still your brother. I'm just more than that now." Sarah nodded and looked around the complex. "Show me what we need to learn." The training program combined traditional Federation military education with theoretical physics that pushed the boundaries of known science. Volunteers learned to think in 11 dimensions simultaneously, to perceive time as a navigable space, and to understand consciousness as a fundamental force of reality rather than an emergent property of complex matter. Most importantly, they learned about the entities themselves. The scouts that had been probing Federation space weren't malevolent in any sense humans would recognize. They were desperate refugees from a dimensional layer where their reality had been consumed by something even more alien. Their attempts to break into the material universe weren't invasion so much as evacuation. "This changes everything about our defensive strategy," Sarah said after reviewing the intelligence reports. She'd adapted to the enhanced perceptions faster than any previous trainee, her consciousness expanding to accommodate 11-dimensional thinking with remarkable ease. Marcus nodded. "The other Guardians have been treating this as a war, but it's actually a refugee crisis on a scale beyond imagination. What consumed their original dimension? We call them the Silence," Marcus explained, "accessing memories inherited from Guardians across millennia. They're not entities in any sense we can understand. They're areas where existence itself stops functioning. They don't destroy reality. They edit it. Anything that encounters them simply ceases to have ever existed." Sarah shuddered, her enhanced perceptions allowing her to grasp the implications more fully than her previous baseline consciousness could have handled. "And the entities are running from these things? For billions of years, the Silence has been gradually consuming their dimensional layer. The entities have been systematically retreating through adjacent realities, sealing each one behind them to slow the Silence's progress. Our dimension is the last viable reality they can reach." This revelation prompted an emergency meeting of the Cosmic Council. Representatives from every major civilization gathered in the training complex to hear Marcus and the other new human Guardians present their analysis. "You're suggesting that our choice isn't between defending our reality and losing it," said the representative from the Ethereal Collective. "You're saying our choice is between sharing our reality or losing it to something worse." "Exactly," confirmed Guardian Thekvar, one of the 3 original Guardians who had joined the meeting via quantum consciousness projection. "The mathematics are inescapable. If the Silence breaks through into our dimensional layer, everything that exists will be retroactively erased. Not destroyed, erased. The universe will become as if it had never existed. But if we allow the entities to enter our reality," protested the Machine Collective representative, "won't they change the fundamental nature of our existence?" Sarah stepped forward. "We've been analyzing that possibility. The entities don't want to reshape our reality. They want to hide within it. They're willing to exist as a background presence, barely detectable, if it means survival. Their impact on our physics would be minimal. What they're offering," Marcus added, "is a symbiotic relationship. They possess knowledge of dimensional engineering that goes far beyond anything we've developed. In exchange for refuge, they're willing to teach us how to reinforce the barriers permanently. Not just against them, but against the Silence itself." The debate that followed lasted for days. Some council members argued for maintaining the barriers regardless of consequences, believing that protecting their reality's integrity was worth any cost. Others advocated for immediate integration, arguing that any chance of stopping the Silence was worth taking. The decision ultimately came down to a simple question. Did they trust humanity's assessment of the situation? "The human Guardians have demonstrated capabilities beyond our expectations," Observer Venth said during the final council session. "Their multi-dimensional perception allows them to analyze the entity's true nature in ways previous Guardians could not. I propose we proceed with their recommendation. The vote was close, but the council agreed to attempt negotiation with the entities. The process would require careful preparation. Direct communication with beings that existed in adjacent dimensions was dangerous for non-guardian consciousness. Even with protection, there was a risk that the negotiators could be accidentally possessed or driven insane by exposure to alien thought patterns. Marcus volunteered to make first contact. Along with Sarah and 12 other human guardians, he entered a specially constructed dimensional interface chamber, deep within the training complex. The chamber existed in a controlled overlap zone between realities, allowing limited communication without fully opening the barriers. The first contact was overwhelming. The entity's consciousness was vast, ancient, and desperate. They had been fleeing for so long that the concept of finding refuge had become almost mythological to them. When they realized the humans were offering negotiation rather than warfare, their relief was so intense that it temporarily destabilized the interface chamber. "They're not what we expected," Sarah said after the initial contact. "They're not a unified species or civilization. They're the survivors from hundreds of different realities, all refugees from the same threat." The entity's story unfolded over weeks of careful communication. They were the remnants of entire universes, civilizations so advanced they had transcended physical existence. Beings that had evolved beyond matter and energy into pure consciousness and mathematics. All had been consumed by the silence's inexorable advance through dimensional space. The silence isn't malicious. Marcus learned from direct interface with an entity that had once been an entire galactic civilization. It's a natural process, like entropy, but operating on a higher dimensional level. It represents the end state of existence itself, the point where reality becomes so complex, it collapses into non-existence. "Can it be stopped?" Sarah asked. "Delayed, possibly. Stopped permanently, unknown. Our original universes developed countermeasures that held for millions of years. But the silence adapted. It learned to consume the countermeasures themselves. This was the ultimate challenge facing the human guardians. They weren't just negotiating the integration of refugee entities into their reality. They were trying to find a permanent solution to a threat that had already consumed countless universes. The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. James Wright, a philosophy professor from Earth who had volunteered for Guardian transformation, proposed a solution that violated every assumption about dimensional physics. "We're thinking about this wrong," he said during a brainstorming session that included human guardians, entities, and the Cosmic Council. "We're trying to fight the silence by building barriers or creating countermeasures within our dimensional framework. But the silence exists because of that framework." "Explain," Observer Venth requested. "Reality operates on rules," Wright continued. "Physics, mathematics, logic. These rules define what's possible and what's impossible. The silence represents the ultimate conclusion of these rules. The final state, where complexity collapses into simplicity, existence into non-existence." Marcus began to understand where Wright was heading. "You're suggesting we change the rules themselves. More than that. We eliminate the framework that makes the silence possible. Instead of existing within dimensional space, we create a new type of reality that doesn't rely on dimensional structure at all." The concept was revolutionary and terrifying. Wright was proposing that they abandon the current universe entirely and construct a new type of existence that the silence couldn't touch because it wouldn't operate on principles the silence could understand or consume. "The entities have the knowledge," Sarah realized. "They've experienced dozens of different universal structures. They understand the mathematical principles underlying reality itself. And humans have the imagination," Marcus added. "We can conceive of impossible scenarios and make them possible." The project that followed was unprecedented in galactic history. Human guardians worked with refugee entities to design a new type of universe, not an alternate dimension or parallel reality, but a completely different approach to existence itself. They called it the synthesis reality. Instead of matter and energy operating within dimensional space, consciousness and possibility would be the fundamental forces. Instead of physics determining what could exist, collective imagination would shape reality, moment by moment. The universe would be created and maintained by its inhabitants' shared understanding of what should be possible. It sounded insane to every non-human consciousness that studied the proposal. But mathematical analysis confirmed that the synthesis reality would be completely immune to the silence's consumption process. The silence operated by making complexity collapse into simplicity, but in the synthesis reality, complexity and simplicity would be equivalent concepts with no meaningful distinction. The transition process will require every conscious being in our current universe to participate simultaneously, Wright explained to the assembled council. We'll need to achieve perfect coordination across billions of species and trillions of individuals. And if even one consciousness refuses to participate? Asked Commander Thax. The transition fails, and we remain vulnerable to the silence. The magnitude of the challenge was staggering. They needed to convince every sentient being in the galaxy to simultaneously abandon their current form of existence and commit to maintaining a new reality through collective consciousness. Marcus took responsibility for coordinating the transition. Using Guardian technology and entity knowledge, he established consciousness links with beings across the galaxy. The network grew slowly at first, but as more beings experienced the direct mental contact and understood the true nature of the threat, acceptance spread rapidly. The entities contributed their accumulated knowledge of dimensional engineering and reality manipulation. Human guardians provided the creative thinking necessary to design impossible solutions. The Federation species offered the coordination and communication networks needed to reach every conscious being in the galaxy. The transition began at precisely calculated moment, when the silence finally breached the weakening barriers of their dimensional layer. As areas of non-existence began spreading through normal space, consciousness across the galaxy unified into a single collaborative effort. Marcus experienced the moment from the perspective of every participating being simultaneously. Billions of minds joined together, sharing understanding of what they needed to create. The old reality dissolved around them as the new synthesis reality crystallized from their collective imagination. The process should have been chaotic, impossible to control or direct. But human consciousness, with its capacity for impossible scenarios, provided the framework that held everything together. Human imagination bridged the gaps between alien thought patterns, translated incompatible concepts into universal understanding, and shaped the raw potential of the synthesis reality into stable existence. When the transition completed, Marcus found himself in a universe that operated on completely different principles. Matter and energy still existed, but they responded to conscious intent rather than physical laws. Distance was a function of desired separation rather than spatial measurement. Time flowed according to narrative necessity rather than linear progression. The silence, attempting to follow its prey into the new reality, encountered something it had never faced before. Existence that refused to be simplified. In the synthesis reality, contradiction and paradox were fundamental features rather than logical impossibilities. The silence's consumption process, designed to resolve complexity into simplicity, found nothing it could process. Status report, Marcus called out, his consciousness touching every guardian across the new reality. Barriers holding stable, reported Guardian Chrythia. The silence cannot penetrate the transition boundary. Entity integration proceeding smoothly, confirmed Sarah. The refugees are adapting to the new reality structure without disrupting local physics. Population transfer complete, announced Guardian Vorthok. Every conscious being from our original universe has successfully transitioned. Marcus allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had done the impossible. They had not just defended their reality from ultimate destruction, they had created an entirely new form of existence that would be permanently safe from the threat that had consumed countless universes before theirs. But the real test would come in the years ahead. The synthesis reality would require constant conscious participation to maintain its stability. Every being in the new universe would need to understand their role in collectively sustaining existence itself. This isn't the end, Marcus announced to the consciousness network that connected all life in their reality. It's a beginning. We've created something unprecedented, but maintaining it will require cooperation and understanding beyond anything any of our species achieved before. As if in response to his words, the new reality pulsed with collective determination. Billions of beings, from hundreds of different universes, committed themselves to the ongoing creation of their shared existence. Humanity had found its purpose in the galaxy, not as conquerors or explorers, but as the bridge between impossibility and reality. Human imagination, enhanced by guardian technology and guided by entity wisdom, had become the cornerstone of a new type of universe. And in the distance, beyond the barriers that protected their reality, the silence continued its advance through dimensional space, consuming universe after universe in its endless quest to reduce all existence to perfect simplicity. But for the first time in cosmic history, it had encountered something it couldn't touch. The synthesis reality existed beyond its reach, a refuge that would endure as long as consciousness itself survived. Marcus stood on the observation deck of what had once been the Guardian training complex, now transformed into the coordination center for their new reality. Through windows that showed not space but pure possibility, he watched beings from across the former galaxy learning to shape existence through conscious intent. Humanity had passed the ultimate test. They had proven worthy not just of survival, but of becoming the foundation upon which all conscious life could build a permanent home. The universe watched, and what it saw was the impossible made real through human determination and alien wisdom working together. The Detector had measured correctly after all. Humans were uniquely qualified for Guardian service. They had guarded not just their own reality, but the very concept of existence itself.